Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to try and help out a friend, a viewer, who's located across the pond in the UK. His name's Paul. Paul has a TLD 15, the Shimano lever drag reel. He took it apart to service it, and something's not working right where he's not getting the spool to engage. So we'll just take this whole thing apart, just like he did, and we'll attempt to put it back together again, and maybe along the way he'll see what part is missing or what part may be stuck in a little bit of a different position than it should be. So the lever drags, generally when they're off, they can free spool, and then as you move these forward they engage, and then you go to a second strike position, which is full drag. And Paul's telling me that in the full position here he's stuck. It's just free spooling. So let's take it apart. It's usually in the springs or in the configuration, and we'll show you how to service one of these if you have it, and we'll show you how to put it back together again if you happen to have one on your bench in parts, and we'll show you what this reel is made of, and why everybody kind of likes it as a fan favorite. So we start by taking that nut cap off, and then we want to grab the right wrench for the cap to be removed, and pull that handle off. Now, one of the things Paul did is he went out to the web and he got this schematic diagram for it, and the schematic diagram will show you a burst. And as you notice, there's an awful lot of washers and shims and bearings. All the action for a lever drag reel is inside the spool, and there's a lot of them, so we want to make sure we have the sequence right as we go about trying to rebuild this. You'll also notice on the schematic it does show you a wrench, and that wrench is used to pull the top cap off that holds all of this together in the spool. So we'll refer back to that at some point if we get stuck along the way, but right now we're going to take that outer plate off, which is going to give us the access to the spool and the gears. Alright, next up then, this is the critical one. This is the lever itself, so we want to take that preset adjuster out. That unscrews counterclockwise. And then underneath that we have a bearing alignment here. It's a little cap, it's the pre-spool adjuster. And I'm just looking for a felt tip pen here. One of the things I like to do with this is I like to put a reference mark. There's a square shaft here, and I like to continue this red line down, drawing that adjuster mark. And then I also put a little bit of an arrow, if you will, noting that that's the one that's in relationship here. Not sure if it ever makes a difference, but I've never encountered problems when I do it that way, because underneath now you'll see that the two of those do seat into it. So if you had it the other way, I guess eventually you'd bring it into alignment, but it's much easier for me just to put those together. So these would line up with the little triangular holes underneath in that orientation, and again I like to do that just as a way to kind of make that easier on me. We have two screws with stops on them, little stop washers, and then we have one screw without it. Those are Phillips head screws, so let's go ahead and take those out. That'll enable us to get the ring off, and the ring will enable us to get access to the screws that are holding the case on. Now the TLD 15 is a very popular reel. Obviously it's available worldwide if Paul's working on this in the UK. And a lot of fans out there for this reel. It's a medium duty ocean reel. It can be used for some pretty big fish, and the beauty of the lever wind drag, we want to note that came off of the handle of the lever wind drag, as opposed to the multi-tiered star drag kind of a system, is you got more drag space. It's consolidated into a single drag, and you should get, as a result of that, more max drag. Alright, there's 5 case screws. I'm going to take those case screws out. They should be the same size, but you never know. So what I like to do, starting in a clockwise fashion is to take these off and lay them next to each other. Now when you're working on some reels have different screws in these locations, so you want to make a note of that. For example, I was just working on a Penn GLS, the Graphite Lever Senator 25, and you had 5 case screws, and of those case screws there were 3 different sets. There was 2 small ones that went on the downside. There was a very fine one that went up top, and then there were 2 others in the trim circle that were different. But these all are the same, so once you do that, you lay them all out, then you can feel comfortable putting them into the parts tray, which I have behind me here. It's just the bottom of a milk jug, but I use that to hold all the pieces and parts together. So now we should be free to remove the side plate. There should be a little spring action and we can pull that off. Very uncomplicated behind the scenes here. You have the ball bearing up top here. You have the main gear. You could push the main gear out at this point. Why not? I'm showing you everything. Push that main gear out and clean up. We can do a little bit of cleanup, but this is more about the assembly for Paul than it is actually fixing this reel at the moment. But if you were to go ahead and service this reel, you would want to do just that. You could put a little bit of blue grease, so we'll go ahead and put some blue grease on this. This is Penn Precision Reel Grease that I'm using here. Use a fishing reel grease when you do the servicing on your fishing reels. It's inexpensive, it's designed for fishing reels, and just makes sense to go ahead and do that. So once you put that back on the shaft, you can push that in. Now you got that anti-reverse dog. In order to seat the anti-reverse dog, you want to grab something like a little micro screwdriver, and you want to push down on that to get it seated. Actually, you want to pull it this way until it works, and then you can just set that aside. We have a bearing there. I'm going to use Reel X. It's a synthetic fishing reel oil, but whatever you do, make sure that the oil that you're using is a super reel oil. Here's a Penn Precision Reel oil. Doesn't matter what brand you're using, but again, just like the grease, make sure that you're using a grease that belongs on a fishing reel. And then this is the setup for the spool gear bearing. And again, a lot of this is to show Paul the way that this should be. That's the spool bearing. Now I like to put it in here when I'm reassembling the reel, because it's easier to mate the smaller parts of the bearing than it is trying to get the teeth in here. Okay, with that we can pull the spool out then. I just lost a pin. Somebody will come back and tell me I lost it. That goes in the back piece of the spool. And I'm going to just put the first part of the parts bucket aside. I'm going to use this second tray for the spool pieces. I'm going to put that right into the spool. A lot of times you can take this off by hand. If you can't, then you can use the tool. But let's just go ahead and see if we can't grab it by hand. Yeah, this one's easy enough to turn by hand. You'll notice on here it says unscrew, and it has the arrow in the direction of that. Let's go ahead and unscrew. This is going to show you the drag plate assembly then. So we have the back of that. We have the pressure plate with a bearing underneath it. We have the drag washer. We have a spring. Take that drag washer out. This is just a fabric drag washer. And then you'll have a bearing here. So that bearing gets oil. Now the drag washer, you can go in just like this, or you can put a light coating of Cal's Universal Drag Grease or another drag grease on there, and then press in. The idea of the drag grease there is to keep this flexible. You want to make sure that it's completely seated on the bottom. We have this third bearing now. We had one in the spool gear, one underneath here, and we have one on the pressure plate. You want to oil that one as well. That goes back on. Oops, almost did that wrong. The spring goes onto the shaft between the bearings, And that's fairly common with a setup for these types of reels. Okay, with that, then I'm just going to close this back up. We'll go over to the other side now. See, I almost got myself there. This is, since unscrew is in that direction, you want to go counterclockwise to tighten this back up. And again, this can be done by hand, but again, if you needed one, some of these require that tool. Okay, that's that side, so let's come over then to the working side of this one. I'll take this apart so Paul can see the setup and how these go. There's two small Phillips head screws here. Again, I'm going to lay them on my table just to make sure that I have both sides are the same screw, as much as you would like to think that they would be. Sometimes they're not. That'll free up the internal piece then. With that, we have the cap with the click rotor, and then underneath that we have the rest of this assembly. So we just did up top here. Here's what's laying below the assembly, and we're going to take these out and lay these piece by piece just so everybody knows what they are. You have a ring, a split ring that's in a groove that's holding this assembly below. We have the next up is the bearing. I'm not going to take this whole thing off, but I'm going to show Paul the sequence here. Just trying to get that little collar washer. There we go. So we have the split ring in the groove holding the bearing below. We have the collar washer. We have two tension washers. We have the base, and we have another collar washer which holds the cap assembly here. We have two of them. One of them is stuck on here below. You can see that here. Okay, so two go below. All right, so two tension washers, the small washer for the bearing shield, the bearing, and then the clip that goes and holds all of that to this side. While I have this out, we might as well go ahead and oil that bearing. Push all of that down. And put that second one back on. And take the entire assembly now. We're going to push that through. Make sure that it comes through the top as it was with the other. Seat the bearing into the spool. Now we can put that cap back on. And that cap should have a little bit of tension. And we can take our two little small screws, which aren't easy for me to do. Get those all set up there. So that's the spool assembly. And I suspect that if we're not getting tension on that drag when we go to reassemble, one of the key elements there is the spring inside this, where the pressure plate is, and the order and sequence of those washers on the spool shaft. You can use a micro screwdriver on this if you don't have a fine tipped Phillips head, because you're going to have a little bit of it's a small screw. Okay, so that's this. And then to reassemble then, I'm going to take that spool gear as I mentioned. I'm coming the other way now. I find it's easier for me to put the spool gear in to the holder. I'm just putting some grease onto the gear. I find it's easier for me to load this in here and then grab that pin, get that into the back of the axle shaft, and then that pin is going to go into the crossbar there. You got to kind of eyeball it, but eventually you get it. There we go, we're in with that. And then I can take the top assembly and mate the two. such. I like to give it a spin at that point just to make sure that I've got it spinning properly. I'm going to come back here and grab those 5 screws then. We're done with that tray. Actually, I'll put the big pieces in there. I want to get those 5 side plate screws. When I do this one, I like to do a balancing act here to keep the tension the right way. So I'm going to kind of go northeast and west on this one. There's no south. But we'll go top. We'll go right side. Go back and do the left side. So if you're a fan of lever drag reels, this one's been around a long time and it's very popular. It's got the 4 ball bearings. You saw that's a nice construction there. It's got solid metal gears. It's got a nice surface to that drag washer. So it's got some pretty big line capacities here. It's got 450 yards with 20-pound monofilament test. So it also has 300 or 30-pound test. So it's telling you it's prepared for big fish. And it's been known to catch, double that weight in class. I believe you could use braid. I don't know why you couldn't on this reel. There's no line guides or anything that would be problematic there. I like to turn the thing, make sure my gears are working as well. I'm going to go ahead and put that little just looking for the O-ring, that copper washer that went on there that came out earlier. Put that on the handle. Come back up here now, put the trim ring and the arm on. So with the arm you kind of preset it. Then we can bring this over and lay that down. Trying to get that little click tongue. There's a click tongue here on the arm. You want it, there you go. You want to make sure that you get the click tongue in. And then we have those 2 side bumpers. They go on each side. East and west again if you're looking at the reel. Those will stop the lever drag handle. And I like to throw the drag over to the side. Remember what we did? We lined it up on the side here. And I'm going to grab my reference marks. Make sure that I have that seated properly. There we go. You have to push down there, make sure you're on that square. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck with this. Now we got it. All right, Paul, so note to self, make sure that that square, we're okay with this now. Make sure you have that reference point. Make sure that this is pressed down, that that square is fully seated on this shaft. Then you'll get it, or you should get it. Okay, now I want to put that other screw back here. Looking in my parts tray, I just noticed that I'm missing that 3rd screw here. Okay, that last screw then, I just dropped it on the floor. That's why we stopped the video there for a moment. Yep, I drop things all the time. I have a solid plastic mat, like a mat that you would find in an office for rolling chairs. I have that below me so that if I do drop it, I can find it relatively easily. All right, up to the handle then. Oops. We want to grab that handle nut. a 10mm wrench. That's the wrong wrench. 10mm wrench. Line this up so that we can get that nut cap on. That's usually you want to be square to it. So this is quick take apart, put back together, about 15 minutes, unless you run into some trouble there. And hopefully we've solved Paul's trouble. So right now I don't have a drag. I have myself free spinning. If I move to first strike, I have the drag, albeit not tight, so we'll use the adjuster just to get that nice and tight. And when we go over to full, well, we should have a full throw there. Drop it back down, free spool, first strike. Probably want to tighten it up a little bit more. There you go, it's probably about right. Drop it back down, try it again, first strike, you got it turning. Oh, so you want to play with this, you want to continually get it right. First strike, there you go, now we got it, and then second strike I'll have a lot of tension, there we go. So that's it then. So generally you'll see I use the midpoint to kind of determine where the right tension is on that spool. Kind of hard to tell with this one, it's a black spool. But I hold my thumb against the side and I make sure that I've got tension there, and then as I come over to the full throw. I don't generally adjust presets over on the back side where it's free spooling, because that should be, as its nature, away from the drag itself. That's why I like to adjust it in the front side and then go full. Okay, Paul, greetings from the US across the pond. I hope all is well, and I hope this showed you how to put it back together again and get that star adjuster, or that free spool adjuster, working for you. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.